Yeah, know about this? The driveway in. Yes.
And give Faye time to get down here. I don't see James.
We got some good neighbors.
Mike is here.
One.
James is not here.
I remember years ago.
Pete's here. He just, oh, there he is. Okay. So we got 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, we're good to go. Okay.
We're going to talk tonight about the comprehensive plan.
Briefly, yeah. I don't think there's going to be much change with the, I asked to look at the, whatever it was, the philosophy thing, vision statement. I don't think there's going to be much change in that. The next step's going to be a little more likely to change things. Okay, we got, James is here.
Hi, James.
How are y'all?
Very well, thank you.
Okay, if we can go ahead and get started, please. We're well past 6:30.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. I'm still trying to get people to sit down.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is on. There you go.
Yeah, Nathan said he would do the recording.
I know.
Yeah, it was fine. You know.
That's okay.
Okay. Oh, Shapiro. I have no idea.
No, this guy here, right here.
Yeah, that's right. Him? No, I don't know. I forget. All right, let's go ahead and try and get this started, please. We do have a quorum. We have Nathan Cohen is not present, but everybody else is here. We need to review the agenda, and if you would, everybody make sure your microphones are on because Nathan will be doing the minutes from the recording. Let's take a quick look at the agenda. We do need to, when we look at the cases, we want to try and we'll want to move the Krieglersville Elementary School case to first, and we're going to have Jonathan will give us some input on that before we go into our regular questions. So other than that, does anyone see anything we need to change?
Make a motion, we accept it as submitted.
Second.
All right. Any other? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay. Then we will go ahead as it's presented. Review of the minutes from the June 15th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. Take a quick look at those, please. Does anyone see any changes that need to be made? All right, if not, can I hear a motion to approve the minutes? Moved, seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. Since we approved the agenda as it was, we'll go ahead and get the first case out of the way. As always, we will read the case. Ligon will give us input, answer any questions. The applicant can then be given a chance to speak to the Planning Commission. And then if there's any public comment, we have time for that. Okay. First case is case number SU-09-22-20. Kathleen and Marshall Jenkins have applied to subdivide an existing 277.7 acre A1 agriculture zone parcel. The subdivision would create 3 new parcels and 1 residue parcel. The new parcels would be 18 acres, 42.6 acres, and 126.5 acres, and the residue parcel would be 90.4 acres. The subject parcel has not been subdivided in the previous 10 years, and future subdivision rights would be exhausted for a minimum of 10 years from the date of recordation. The subject parcel contains 2 single-family dwellings addressed as 1573 and 1361 James City Road, Riva, Virginia, and is identified on Madison County's tax maps as 33-3. Ligon, would you update us on that?
Yeah, Mike pointed on the actual ad, which won't go out till the end of August. On the actual ad, I have 08. I thought we were going to go forward with both of these in August, but they're both going to be in September. So just FYI, I'll change that to 09. Thanks for those sharp eyes, Mike. Yeah, this is by right. So it would make 4 parcels. 2 of the parcels have dwellings and septic systems. The 2 other parcels that are vacant, that would be, have no structures on them, or they've already gotten the soil work done and submitted to VDH. So that should be, they should have gone out and looked at that before September. Plenty of time. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward by right subdivision. I did just throw in there, and I probably will do this with the ads where it's relevant, is that once subdivided, these parcels would be in a 10-year hold period before they could be subdivided again. So just as a FYI. That's about it on that one.
All right. Does anyone have a question for Ligon?
I do.
Yes.
It looks like a lot B, looks like the road goes through the septic field.
Oh, lot B. Yeah, it's a proposed drain field. It looks like a little bit of it. I think that's about a 10,000 square foot area, and maybe a little bit of it goes into. Yeah,
Looks like it.
right.
The proposals.
Yep.
in the road.
It could go a little bit. What they put 50 foot there, so a little bit of it could go in there. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but it definitely wouldn't be in the road base or anything. But I'll ask them about that.
Okay. Are all of these are served by the same private drive? Is that right?
That's right. It's 2 entrances that are already existing. They would be upgraded. At least the one entrance would just serve one house as it does now. The other entrance would serve one existing house, and potentially on the two other parcels it could serve.
So Lot A has an existing driveway there.
That's right.
Okay. So B, C, D are served by the new private road.
Well, it's actually already there,
It's-
but it would need to be extended and improved.
It looks like it goes between 2 buildings there. It's kind of hard to tell from the scale, but there are
Yeah.
2 barns where it shows the road going between them.
Yeah, I haven't been out there yet, so
If I may,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if y'all are familiar when Prince Michelle first got started, they actually had vineyards, and this was the back side of that property where a lot of that operation went on. So there used to be a house that was tore down, which is that smaller driveway,
Mhm.
and the larger driveway goes back around a nice older farm home in the barn.
Uh-huh. Any other questions or comment from the planning commission? Do we have the applicant here?
no, he's not here.
Okay.
They'll be here on the 7th.
Okay. Without the applicant, is there any public comment on this case? All right. Thank you, Ligon. Next case is case number RZ-09-22-21. Criglersville Elementary School LLC has applied to rezone 5.83 acres from A1 agriculture to M1C limited industrial with conditions as allowed by right per Articles 9-1-20 and 9-1-36. In the M1 zoning district, the applicant is seeking to utilize the parcel's existing buildings the former Kriegersville School, and the former voting precinct building for a mixture of short-term lodging units, a restaurant/bar, event/venue space, and retail space. In addition, the applicant is seeking to construct new short-term lodging units, cabins, on the property. The total number of new short-term lodging units would not exceed 11 total units. And those lodging units would be a mixture of 1 and 2 bedroom units, with 1 unit potentially containing up to 8 bedrooms. The former Kriegersville School structure has roughly 15,000 square feet of interior area and is proposed to contain up to 20 short-term lodging units. And the former voting precinct building has roughly 2,300 square feet of interior area and is proposed to be utilized for retail space. The parcel's postal address is 1120 Old Blue Ridge Turnpike, Madison, Virginia, and is identified on Madison County's tax maps as 21-61. In this particular case, Jonathan has asked to address us because he's more familiar with this case right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. I just wanted to do some initial discussion points. Ligon's done a very good job identifying a potential, the rezoning as M1. So I want to give you a little bit of background. Earlier on, when Mr. Shapiro came to us of interest in the property, that's kind of where it began. We gave him a lot of information on the property, so there's no buyer beware type of activity. But I wanted to let you know that upon the Board of Supervisors reaching a purchase agreement with Mr. Shapiro, there were some things in the contract. Particularly, I just want to mention the timeline to rezone. So there was a 60-day timeline to file the rezoning application. So that's why it's here tonight. He has met that threshold. When it comes to zoning, we would request consideration at least when it gets to the joint meeting, but I'll throw it out there now that if it were to be approved, the condition that will be consistent with the contract, in Exhibit A of the contract, there's a restriction of use, and that says the property shall not be used as an equipment storage yard, inventory storage yard, or salvage yard. Mr. Shapiro is well aware of that. Obviously, his attorney has discussed that, and he's aware that that would be something the board would consider, but I think the Planning Commission needs to be aware of that. None of his activities none of the activities Mr. Shapiro has planned would even bring that into discussion, but I think it's fair that the contract, and should this be approved, the rezoning conditions would, kind of mirror one another. Since this project began, our earlier discussions was as defined with the former voting precinct being used for some portion of retail. I've talked to Mr. Shapiro about the parking spaces per, I think it's 150 square feet. There's some criteria, so he's aware through his planning phase. Same thing when it comes to lodging. There's a parking space, 4 units, so he's aware of those things. We talked a lot about the main building, which will be event venue space and some lodging. More recently, he's given me a little insight into what you're going to be hearing also tonight, some additional lodging at the back of the property. I do know Mr. Shapiro will have a soil scientist out later next month. So naturally, even what he's put before you tonight, it's in my opinion that soil work will really determine what can be done out there. But he's given a little update to the Realtor Roundtable today, so I think he's ready for your questions, a lot of them, which is going to be asbestos, mediation, or well and septic, or floodplain. So he's got a lot of that information that he personally could speak to tonight. But I did want to make you aware of kind of these timeline things and the work that's in progress, kind of a due diligence period, if you will. And again, the soil work, in my opinion, will determine really how much he can put on this property. Of the 5.83 acres, we've had Mr. Lewis. Actually, I think he's doing survey work for Mr. Shapiro on his side. He was asked to create a survey boundary around what the county would look to maintain, which is also in the contract, which is roughly about 0.8 acres of the 5.83. which if your back's against the Blue Ridge Turnpike facing what is now the Mountain Museum, it would be that rectangle portion. So from Blue Ridge Turnpike, which includes the Displaced Family Memorial, all the way back to the fence line, and in between the trees and the driveway is what we would look to maintain, which would also have a dedicated easement to get to that, because that's also a polling place. So I just wanted to give you some of that background information. The zoning part, Ligon's got a very good handle on. So unless you have any specific questions about that, Mr. Chairman, I can kick it over to Ligon for zoning.
Okay, Peter, you have a question?
Yeah, Jonathan, is the contract confidential, or can we be permitted to see
You can
it?
be permitted. I will shoot that over to Ligon. That's a public document, so I will shoot that over to Ligon right now. I got it up on email. I'll forward it. Ligon, if you'll please give that out to all planning commission members.
Any other question for Jonathan from the planning commission? Okay, then, okay, Mike, yeah.
Actually, I guess it may be for Legan, but I'm just looking under the M1. That does it say lodging? I can't find lodging under zoning for that.
Yeah, so it says hotel, motel,
It
which,
says that? I didn't see
yeah,
that.
it's under M1, under one of the, it says right here, it's 9-1-20. Club or lodge, which I think that's kind of vague, but then it says motel, hotel, lodging, motel, hotel. That's where I would consider short-term lodging.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Pete?
I have a question for Jonathan. Now, I may be wrong on this, Jonathan, but it seems like I remember that across the road from there, the county also owned a piece of property that was part of that school.
Mhm.
Is that piece of property included into it, or have we taken that out?
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. And I meant to catch you before the meeting. We have fixed your microphone, by the way, so no more on the
Okay.
handheld. But very good question, sir. So that piece of the property will convey with Mr. Shapiro. So I think at one time, of course, the river kind of shifted. Is almost an acre of the 5.83 is across the Blue Ridge Turnpike, but that will convey with the sale to Mr. Shapiro.
What is the schedule, Jonathan, for the implementation of this sale if it hasn't already gone through?
So there are periods, and I'll pass this along to you. I just put some timelines. You can have my copy, and I'll share that electronically. Actually, the email I'm forwarding you, sir, has the timeline in the contract, so the planning commissioners can see both. There's a 90-day period, which is kind of due diligence or a study period. That is scheduled to end at September the 13th at midnight. A lot of that work he's already started, and he can talk to you about submitting flood certificates and all that stuff. Then there was a 60-day timeline I talked about, and all this was upon signature of the contract, that the rezoning application must be filed. So that must be done by August 14th. So he has met that. That's why you're here tonight. And then upon zoning approval, should it be approved, then 31 days after that would be when we officially close on the property. I did some anticipation. Should this go through 2 workshops? Because when I drafted this, we were unsure if it was going to come up in August or September. So if it goes through 2 workshops, then the closing, if it's approved, would occur on or before around Friday, October 7th. So there's a lot of work to do there, and that's kind of a 2-part deal. A lot of it's on Mr. Shapiro's side, but the good thing is he's started a lot of the work. Like I said, the soil evaluation, I believe he's got a lot of engineering and flood map review. I think there's some historic district designation he can speak of tonight. I believe you have your attorney with you tonight as well. So there's a lot of folks that he's brought in from his team that's already begun on this. But here's a hard copy. Mike, if you mind passing that on. And then this email, members of the Planning Commission that I'm sending Ligon, will go to y'all, has this timeline I just handed Peter, as well as the contract.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions for Jonathan? Daniel? Yeah.
This is probably for Jonathan also. When you made the comment about the what was in the contract, and I think one of the things you said there was no storage allowed.
Let me bring that back up 1 second.
Give me 1 second. I should not have closed that. See attachment A. I won't get bifocals. I'm gonna go back and forth.
If that's true, I think you need to clarify that.
It's equipment storage yard, inventory storage yard, or salvage yard.
Because during construction, that's gonna happen.
I think this is looking at permanent use
Okay.
is what, and Mr. Shapiro asked a very good question this week, event venues and so forth would store chairs. Well, certainly there are places like Rimback Barn who store chairs for their events. I would not qualify that as any equipment storage yard or inventory storage yard. I mean, it's for your business practice. But certainly, the planning commission can suggest any language that they may wish. I just wanted to point that out for clarity. So whatever conditions you put in, should this be approved, should really mirror the contract. Again, Mr. Shapiro is well aware of those. We just wanted to make sure one document points to the other.
Well, does the contract provide for additional conditions?
This was the only restriction, but basically your zoning would take care of what's going to be allowed. We're just trying to put those specific conditions because that is what was specified in the contract.
Okay. Because I don't see how you could have conditions on top of provisions of the contract.
Yes, sir.
All right. Any other question
Well,
for Jonathan?
To answer that question, Mr. Work, the special use permit, and in fact, the rezoning, we could impose additional conditions, as necessary. In other words, we're not constrained exclusively by the contract. And, this has been a pretty amicable negotiation up to this point, so I do not anticipate there'll be any problems.
Thank you. Any other question for Jonathan? All right, Ligon, would you carry on then, whatever else you need to tell us about the M1?
Yeah, the whole point when we did this a few years ago, someone came forward and wanted to do, develop the property in a similar fashion. We didn't have anything concrete in front of us. But the idea of the mixed use is to sort of give the applicant a chance to sort of be creative with maybe some of the different uses. And B1 might have been a better place for it, but we put it in M1, which is fine. With working with the applicant, and I think we will go through conditions and things that I think we both have kind of already talked about, things that we can kind of check off that, there are many things that have to be done. The cabins, you're going to have your drain fill, or there are also some negotiations or things that they're doing right now with the floodplain to potentially get that flood map amended. That's a pretty lengthy process. Now, Jamie, our building official, has a fair amount of experience in flood mapping, and he's not super optimistic that it will be moved, but I mean, I have seen that process and I've worked with that process before where the map was amended. So, that's something that there is a plan B if that doesn't work. So I guess from my perspective is what's being presented here is what is being asked to be approved. And between now and the next, at least before the next workshop, we're really going to kind of drill down into this and kind of working to see what the conditions are and come back with something for the workshop that we feel like, the county and applicants can live with. So I think it's an exciting proposal for a redevelopment. I mean, we know the history of this. When I first started, we were going to pay a bunch of money to tear it down. Now we're talking about potentially, regardless of how this eventually unfolds as far as what's approved, we're looking into breathing life into a building that again, a few years ago looked like it was basically lost. So I think that's a win. Of course, then the letters haven't gone out to the public, and I'm sure at the next meeting, the letters will go out. So we will probably sort of get an idea what the folks who live in and around that at least think about this proposal. But, you know, it was an elementary school for many years that, you know, has a pretty large traffic volume, very predictable, but, you know, still a lot of cars in and out. This is going to be totally different. You know, you're probably looking at your nights and weekends and typical holidays, and spring and summer as being really sort of busy moments. So it's a different traffic pattern, but of course we'll get VDOT comments, what they think on that. So really just kind of, from my perspective, I've just kind of scratched the surface what we'll be doing the next few weeks. So.
Okay, and if I understand, Jonathan,
Is the only thing we're being asked to consider and approve, or consider tonight, strike approve, is the rezoning?
Yeah, I mean, tonight is just a get to know you type scenario. So the application, the actual hearing will be until September 7th, that first Wednesday. I believe it's the 7th. So this workshop, and the next workshop, you know, any concerns that you may have, to direct or the applicant to think about, maybe that are concerns, is really the time to talk about right now. As far as what's being proposed, I mean, the ad that was written is what is proposed. So, you know, up to 11 individual lodging units. You know, it could be small. You know, maybe that's an area of concern for some of you, maybe the board. But there's sort of two different factors there. One is, you know, will it be possible to support that with a traditional drain field? I was just telling Jonathan this afternoon, you know, there's a engineering component to it that if you can't meet these requirements, you're just not going to be able to do it. But I would sort of look at it, if I was in your shoes or the board's shoes, is if this is approved, this is what will be there. So if there's something about, I don't keep picking on the lodging units, but if something about that makes you uncomfortable, then assume that if approved, this will be this will be what will be built. But again, with the understanding that there's still sort of a lot of work needs to be done to get that maybe become a reality. So, and you know, even between now and next workshop, I mean, I'd like to get kind of an idea. Again, the cabins, what are they going to look like? Is there some kind of rendering that can be potentially proffered? I think those are important. I'm trying to think what else is, you know.
Are we talking about actual rezoning or conditional rezoning?
So when I say conditions, it's rezoning, it's an M1, and we know that, and I just put conditions, that there are going to be some conditions that are offered by the applicant that we're working on that will be part of the rezoning. So if one of the conditions is, and there's no more than 20 lodging units in the main school building, it's not going to show up with a site plan or build permit and say, I've got 25. I mean, that's a condition. And it will runs with the land just like the zoning itself does. So when I say conditions, it means that we don't have them written, but I think we expect that there are going to be some conditions. And I think most of them we probably are, at least from my perspective, are probably in pretty much agreement with. And
are these conditions to rezoning or what?
Just there are conditions as part of the rezoning. The applicant is proposing conditions that will run with the rezoning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lincoln, I have a question. Could you explain to me the setbacks? Because the way I look at it, the setbacks don't meet, I don't think, and I might be wrong, what our ordinance says.
Yeah. So, I mean, the existing building and the existing structures for M1 do not meet the existing setbacks. New structures would be required to meet the setbacks. And if I look at what is it? It says the minimum side rear yard setbacks is 15 feet, except for that when permitted use adjoins and adjacent to a residential, agriculture, conservation zone area, the sites rear yards Side and rear yard setback shall be 60 feet. They do have I think on the rear, that is something that can be achieved with the lodging. It's something probably need to think about with the greenhouse and the other. It kind of it sort of, and I didn't think about this, or we didn't think about this when we adopted this mixed use, but it sort of defeats the whole purpose of mixed use. If again, the whole purpose of the mixed use is to present, show how you want to develop the site, and you sort of judge it on that. So I like to think of a potential solution that would give the applicant, ability to propose what they're doing if you think it's appropriate, and we vote it up. If not, so that's something I just have to put some thought into. But
I guess I got a question for Sean. If the setback doesn't meet the ordinance, is that something that could go to the BZA board, and the BZA board could change that?
I believe, and Ligon may have a better answer on this, if it is out of compliance and it does create a hardship, then that is something that the Board of Zoning Appeals could consider, assuming that the appeal is made to the Board of Zoning Appeals in a timely manner and all of those things.
I mean, that's what we've done in the past. I still would probably prefer, in true spirit of mixed use, that we just evaluate it on its face, and whether it's, just the 60-foot seems a little arbitrary to me. So I'd rather somehow, if it's taken to the Board of Zoning Appeals, we can figure that out. But something I'll just have to work on the next few weeks.
But it gets really close when, I guess, the mountain house that's the museum, when you give that, it's 60 foot, and then you come 60 foot from the school. It really, really cuts it down there, and so does it on the other end of the school where you come down by the fence. It really cuts it down there. It's something that the board could decide, or the planning commission, or whoever. I'm just saying it's getting real tight.
Yeah, ideally, when we did the mixed use, we probably should have put some sort of provision in that says that setbacks can be proposed outside the front setback. That would have probably been.
Okay. Any other question for Ligon? Just a quick question then, Ligon. Is the well up there, that's not the existing well, is it? Is that
I think it's just proposed where you.
proposed?
That is highly conceptual.
Okay. And the majority of the details on this are contingent on the soil scientist work anyway, right? There's
Right.
not a whole lot we can say about total numbers and things like that until that's done. Yeah. Any other question for Ligon?
I guess, would any part of the old septic system, and until you do the science work, would any part of the old system be used?
For modeling purposes, we have assumed that there are no components of the existing system that are sort of salvageable to modern standard. That being said, I know that in the redevelopment of the Devil's Backbone facility, they had an existing underground storage tank that they were able to sort of leverage as a retaining basin for their septic system. So I certainly don't want to write that off as a possibility. There is a fairly large tank sort of stage right and in front of the school, adjacent to the parking lot. So as inspires the whole project, it is efficient to reuse what we can from a cost perspective, but certainly not to the exclusion of meeting sort of modern health, safety, and environmental standards. If that makes sense.
Okay, since we're at the applicant now, let's continue. Do you have any other things to address us with?
Sure thing. I certainly don't.
Could we start with you introducing yourself to us and telling us something about you and what your vision for this property is?
Happily. Well, it is great to meet you all. Those of you that I do not know, great to be with everybody today. My name is Felix Shapiro. I am a developer, I guess architecture lover, and Madison County lover from Richmond, Virginia. I was originally brought here by the incredible hiking, but as the top of this meeting, I have stayed because of the incredible asset that is Kriggersville Elementary School. So I'm very excited to be with you all. This is a major milestone in a long journey. I've thoroughly enjoyed navigating with the folks from the county. I have much thanks and appreciation for their counsel on what zoning might most adequately capture, what we're trying to do, what might best serve the interests of the community, what have you. So that's at least a note of introduction about myself. I would be remiss not to offer a couple of other introductions, as was previously alluded to. My lawyer, Ashley, is here with us, so any fastball questions should be directed at her and not me. And also with me is my girlfriend, Samantha Galena. Rest assured that whatever standard, aesthetic or otherwise, you all are holding this project to, it will be held to a much higher standard at home. So I have a keen set of eyes looking over my shoulder at all times and making sure everything isn't just, within the letter of the zoning law, but also within customer taste and just good taste in general. So she won't let me build anything ugly. Trust me. Sure thing. I have pulled together a series of slides. I certainly won't take much of your time. I think Jonathan explained and Ligon explained everything better than I ever could, but I have given it a shot. Of course, the obligatory picture of the school by a local artist I actually found in a restaurant in town. So I have not committed copyright infringement in a government meeting. But as you all know, we are here to discuss a potential rezoning of the property to M1 mixed use to permit the land to be used as a hotel with retail and dining accessory uses, which was about the most straightforward way I could think. That's a sentence that could be 10 pages, depending on detail. So overarchingly, the Kriggersville Elementary School will be restored to an event venue, boutique hotel, restaurant, retail establishment, and community asset. The somewhat small, I'm now realizing, drawing beside is a conceptual plan. I will fully admit I mocked up and not my architect. That is driven by, I think, the many unanswered questions, many of which have been raised today, and one of which is, candidly, the zoning itself. So this represents sort of my best understanding and best belief as to where the project is headed. Please know things like specific position of the well. I know from my conversations with the county, it needs to be at not just the 50 feet from the septic system itself, but 50 feet from structures on the property or on my neighbor's property. So that is a design element. I realize there may be a barn within 50 feet of where that well is today. These things will move and are expected to move as we learn more about site conditions, as we continue our conversation. But this sort of represents, at the current moment in time, my best understanding. And so I'm here to share it with you. As Jonathan mentioned, there was, according to the contract, an obligation, and one I welcome, to turn in the zoning in a timely manner. And so I wish I had total knowledge of every grain of sand and soil beneath the property. Alas, that is coming, but is not here yet. And so just wanted to have that caveat. So I've taken the liberty of divvying that picture into larger subdivided pictures to sort of help facilitate the conversation. As Ligon was mentioning, at the very back of the parcel, we are optimistic about the potential of building something of a lodging complex. This complex it's interesting. I mean, as I think anybody would, obviously the most attention getting part of the parcel is the primary structure at the front, and that is what attracted me to the parcel and what drove me to start the conversation. As I have continued through this due diligence period, I have come to realize that given the complexities of the floodplain as it currently sits, I will say I having consulted my architect, am a great deal more optimistic than some about the likelihood of that floodplain moving. I think to me, it is less a question of whether it will move and more a question of where exactly it will move. And that will certainly have implications for the plan. But I just wanted to throw that out. Admittedly, not an engineer, but have paid many for the right to talk to them about this at this point. So realizing that that our plan for the primary structure will be impacted by that floodplain decision, which we anticipate to be about 7 months out, as well as driven by the decisions of the Department of Historic Resources at the state level around the creation of the Krieglersville Historic District, something I'm very excited to talk to y'all about in a bit. Those processes, though underway, will take some time. And strangely enough, the back of the complex, which I had originally imagined would, if it ever happened, be a conversation we'd be having 10 years from now when the hotel was, a successful enterprise and hopefully a pillar of the Madison County business community, is actually, from just sort of a raw development standpoint, far more approachable than the reconfiguration and renovation of the primary structure, given its position in the floodplain and the prerequisite work needed to be done to qualify it for the historic tax credit, which candidly is the economic underpinning of the project. And so that is why you see it at the top. It has a number of added benefits, not to get you all into the weeds of project financing, but having the opportunity to add value to the parcel early on, it is largely beneficial sort of from a financing perspective when we go to do the capital raise for the primary structure's renovation. That may be too much inside baseball for this body, but that I thought it might be helpful to sort of illuminate our thinking around this. I heard loud and clearly the conversations about the setback. I certainly hope we can figure out. I admittedly have not clearly factored 60 feet from the peripheries of the parcel into my drawings. Hopefully we can figure out a path forward, but if not, I certainly have every intention of following, both the letter and spirit of Madison County's code and ordinances. So, you are the government, and I will do as you say, and figure out a path forward that is consistent with your requirements. So that being said, I think the lodging, it's important to note, we had in the application 11 outbuildings standing out there. 11 outbuildings might be a little bit cramped. Appreciating the merits of Ligon's comment that the max threshold is a possibility and should be considered as such. In putting this application together, given the requirement that I do so early in the process, my goal was to come up with figures where I would be constrained by the realities of the site and the taste of my girlfriend in terms of density. We hope to be a wedding venue. This is the most important day of folks' lives. Nobody wants to have that day in a place that feels like it was value engineered to cram as many bodies as possible on a small piece of land. So we certainly have no intention of having that be the sort of aesthetic of the rear portion. We are hoping for, and this may not be as descriptive, sort of a fairy tale garden aesthetic with sort of cabins tucked in a not entirely regular pattern, sort of connected by intertwining paths. I found that adding some curvature to paths is a good way to make a small parcel feel a little bit bigger. So that's what we are hoping to do back there. That lodging area would be bounded by a smaller rectangle that would be sort of purely garden and aesthetic to provide something of a buffer from the area labeled the number 2, which would be an open space serving the wedding venue that would, I envision, facing, I guess, east towards what we we hope to be sort of a heritage apple orchard / chef's garden that would serve the restaurant. We've become very interested in, there are a number of fruits and foods that I was previously unfamiliar with, everything from the damson plum, Merkle mushrooms, what have you, that we really want to showcase and do what we can to show people where they come from on site, though we plan to source predominantly from vendors in the surrounding community. Backing up, that space is what we envision as sort of a greenhouse-inspired bridal suite. That wouldn't be a place people stayed overnight, but it would be sort of a space where brides and their bridesmaids could prepare. I guess, wedding parties can pick if they want to flip-flop venues with the groom, if the bridal party really wants pinball machines and arcades, which will be located in the pool house you see sort of at the bottom of the number 3 on the screen, abutting the pool. Though the phase 1 environmental site assessment it will not be completed until August. I, just on the basis of intuition, would not be surprised if under the historic oil tank in the back of the property there was some excavation needed. So that's a pool is an artful way to fill a hole left from soil remediation. Abutting the pool is, as you can see, a patio, and I think that takes us through this slide. We can work our way down. So, okay, here's a not too descriptive picture of what we envision for both the first floor and the second floor. On the second floor, as you can see, it is entirely lodging. There are currently, as I'm sure many of you all know, 2 bathrooms, one on either side on the second floor. Interestingly, something that is not drawn in the original diagrams, and it's actually the only wall I have found that is not, I mean, this building is basically a time capsule from its plans in 1946. It's really cool. There is, however, a wall occluding the, I guess, eastern edge of the second floor hallway, which is really lucky for us. The historic resources folks would never in a million years let us sort of bisect the view down that hallway, which would be sort of, they would hold sacred as speaking of the building's history. But since it has been already vivisected by a wall, that is protected in the design. So we think we can probably fit an additional lodging unit in by combining that bathroom and that hall space. On the other end, the hall is uninterrupted to the end, so in all likelihood remains so. Going to the first floor where there's a little bit more activity and really getting to the heart of the mixed use zoning. We envision lodging in the front classrooms, the former principal's office, the former nurse's office. I believe in the middle, we're likely to see those smaller rooms become part of suites that would be served by about half of the adjoining classrooms. Just from sort of a operational economics perspective, sadly, as much as I would like to maintain full classrooms, I think they'd be really cool. The numbers on the hotel work a whole lot better with 2 rentable rooms in each classroom. That being said, the historic code requires that the view from the windows be left intact. So in bisecting those existing rooms, we would need to be very artful sort of in drawing something of an L shape that maybe dividing with bathrooms in the middle, ensuring those windows were wholly within one unit, and also that the chalkboards that are on, in most cases, 2 walls of each classroom were also not subdivided by walls. So that'll be a place of architectural creativity, if you will, to figure out how to construct sort of a vestibule right as you come in that can service both rooms while meeting fire standards. The existing cafeteria kitchen will serve as a commercial kitchen. Very excitingly, there is already a quite large hood in place in the kitchen, which if any of you guys have worked, it is an expensive feature to recreate. So we're very fortunate and pleased to have sort of the existing infrastructure of the kitchen to leverage and build out. The restaurant slash bar, depending on how you want to describe it. I tentatively envision the bar running along that side wall, sort of just below the commercial kitchen. That being said, the door is sort of hard left on that wall. So we certainly want to make sure there's no obstruction of space. But even with that bar, I think we're likely to be able to fit between 50 and 75 folks easily in that space. Not even spilling over into the old gym, which is accessible through 3 large double doors, which has seating for, God knows, probably 300 people more. Certainly 300, including the restaurant space. With that in mind, that space would serve as the anchor, indoor anchor of the wedding venue. I am constantly amazed when I look at other venues by the fact that so many do not have sort of a ready-made solution in the event of rain. It's, you've spent Lord knows how much money, and then if it rains, call somebody and get a tent is their answer. Or even if it doesn't rain, you still have to call somebody and bring a bathroom trailer out to the site. So by having, plumbed bathrooms and a readily accessible rain venue, it's just, everybody get inside. We think that provides sort of a real benefit to the venue and to our customers, hopefully the community writ large. I think that about covers us on the inside the primary structure. Outside, as was previously mentioned, there is about an acre that encompasses the Robinson River. That is to me such an incredible opportunity to do something not just for the hotel guests, but something really unique for Kriglersville. We were just out there today and talking to some of the neighbors about, and I don't want to bring up a sore subject, this swinging bridge.
Oh, yes.
That is sadly no longer accessible. I certainly don't imagine we can replace the sort of special place that specific bridge has in the heart of Madison County and in the story of Madison County, but hopefully we can at least bring some pedestrian access back to that area of the river, which we imagine would serve maybe a handful of campsites we would make available, but really just be sort of a scenic place you can walk across the river. We want to put, we had talked about a boat ramp. When I go out there and look at the river, it appears a little shallow for kayaking. I guess outside of the times that it is far too deep for kayaking. So maybe it may be more of a tubing ramp than a boat ramp, just practically. And this is a far off fantasy. I don't have a specific partner in mind, or have I talked to anybody, but we would love to see, I know a fair number of folks already tube on the river. So if we could find somebody either upriver, downriver, all along a navigable route, we'd love to partner it and set up some sort of shuttle bus so that people could take tubes up and get back to their cars, which I know from my experience, tubing on the James is frequently a challenge. So, yep, that I think, the outbuilding. So the outbuilding is an interesting question. We'll get in the later slide to sort of where conceptually the flood line may end up falling. We had originally sort of had a fantasy of retail in the front. It would sell, we have a make your own trail mix bar targeting folks coming to hike. That might be a pretty penny per pound, and then sell sort of more typical household goods at very little margin, just as sort of a benefit, because there's not the preponderance retail in the area. So that is our vision for the retail side. In the back, we'd originally envisioned some sort of a hiker hostel, understanding that folks who are through hiking the Appalachian Trail may not be in a position to get a full hotel room. We want to make sure that they can still have, a safe, climate-controlled place to spend the night. That being said, within the floodplain, you cannot have overnight lodging on the first floor of a structure. So, barring unanticipatedly great success with the letter of map change, I think it very likely that space will either have to be a back office for the hotel, some sort of logistical space, maybe expanded retail. But I wanted to put out the sort of full range of possibility for you, despite the indeterminacy. So I think that gets us through this slide. So as previously mentioned, every effort has been made to ensure the accuracy of this presentation, but the specifics of our final site plan depend on the findings from our ongoing due diligence efforts and be constrained by the reality of site conditions. It seems we're having a little cutoff, but I can, it's up here. So Shimp Engineering has been retained to take on the floodplain issue for us, as was previously mentioned. Lewis Surveying is assisting them in that. Essentially, they have drawn a grid across the Krugersville property and will be taking very specific elevation measures at each intersection point along that grid. The way FEMA draws flood maps, they pick a base flood elevation. Everything below that height is in the floodplain. Clearly, water doesn't run uphill. So by performing a more localized analysis, we think we can get that floodplain moved. That effort is bolstered. The Great Flood of 1995, I think, was a 500-year plus flood event. And during that flood, the primary structure did not see any infiltration by water. So there's actually a process by which you can submit to the federal government, to FEMA, the historic record of what's actually happened in above flood condition rain events and use that as a baseline to amend the floodplain. So our engineer is very confident that is likely to go through. Also assisting in that will be Dominion Soil Science. They are coming out on August 22nd. The samples they collect will help the aforementioned flood letter of map change, but will also be a huge source of truth in our fact finding around the septic system. So that's, I think, where a lot of the ambiguity we talked about comes to. We don't know exactly how quickly water infiltrates the soil in that area. And so with those measurements in mind, we'll have a much better sense of what kinds of density would trigger a switch from the far more cost-effective conventional septic system to some sort of more engineered alternative system. Clearly, I mean, just from a cost standpoint, that is a big inflection point in terms of what this thing will cost. And so with many things in development, it's, you either stay under the threshold or you blast above to sort of be able to amortize that big cost. And our hope is to stay comfortably sort of below, barring, really, truly unnavigably unfavorable conditions being during that soil science collection. As previously mentioned loosely, we've retained a firm to do what's called a phase 1 environmental site assessment. That is not detailed soil testing, but is an analysis of the historic use of the property and a means of identifying possible impairments that exist. Finally, as previously talked about, historic tax credits are sort of a key financial cornerstone of this project. And to support that, we have brought on a firm, Dutton and Associates, out of Richmond, who specialize, actually, interestingly, only in the listing process. We've got a different set of historic resources consultants for when we get to the sort of development stage. It is incredible how specialized engineers, consultants are. It boggles the mind. But so they have come out, and we've been very fortunate. The Historical Society, Miss Utz over in the library, I think formerly Miss Krigler before marriage, put together a no.
Bonnie was good.
Sorry, I may be inaccurate.
Close enough.
Sorry. Put together a very interesting presentation on sort of the full history of the area that I was lucky enough to listen to, and lucky enough that the folks preparing this application were able to glean that information. So they have said it's a natural candidate, sort of typifies the conditions the historic tax credit program was designed to protect. I think that. Okay, so as previously stated.
Could we go back to the prior slide?
Sure.
You didn't mention an architect. Have you retained an architect?
I have indeed. So the architect I'll be using is firm Walter Parks Architect. Actually, I will, in the spirit of full confession, say they were my employer during my first summer job when I was in high school. So we have a relationship that goes a ways back. I think I am lucky that is the case. Otherwise, it would be a challenge landing an architect of that stature as a developer taking on a project of this scale. So their portfolio is largely built around historic tax credit projects, which they've done not just in Virginia, but sort of, I think, a number of states. That is their bread and butter, if you will. They're a Richmond-based firm, and we've got the historic tax credit is basically what's funded the redevelopment of Richmond. So they are well versed in the specifics, the requirements of DHR. They also, interestingly, are well versed in the complexities of building a floodplain. One of their projects, and we talked about this early on, a apartment complex in Richmond called the Locks, which is, for those of you that know Richmond geography, sort of down. It is down by the canal in what used to be the Locks, and houses a restaurant, Casa del Barco, a number of apartments. So they are experienced, and I'm very lucky to have them on the team. Sorry, I neglected to include that in the overview. Their role becomes more active as we get sort of through answering the questions of, well, what can we build from a soil perspective? What can we build from a zoning perspective? I heard the question earlier about renderings. There's a bit of a push and pull. I certainly want to give you guys all the information you need to make the decision. There is an expense that comes with producing these renderings, and so I want to make sure I'm not designing things that are conceptually beyond the realm of possible and burning through my runway. But I hope that.
Thank you.
Yeah, as previously mentioned, the current floodplain is the line that slaloms through the back of the property. I have drawn sloppily using Microsoft Paint sort of to the conceptual division point of where the floodplain moves. I am very confident, just given the realities, that it will move in front of the primary structure. The second line represents sort of a more optimistic view that would allow the hospital use case and hiker hospital use case in the outbuilding. Candidly, I think that as I've gone on, I'm an indefatigably optimistic person, but I don't know that we're getting it all that way.
So it sounds like we probably should, for the application,
Probably should consider the voter precinct as potential lodging. It's okay. So maybe that's just something we should clear up before September. Is that could also retail and lodging. So potentially, yeah.
Okay, good. Any questions, Francois? Yeah.
Is there asbestos in that building?
Yes, there is. Thankfully, it is non-friable. So if you don't mess with it, it won't mess with you.
I thought you covered that.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting push and pull with the mandates of the Department of Historic Resources that we preserve, the building as it is and as it was, there that intersects interestingly with mandates that we, encapsulate or remove existing stores of asbestos. I've been advised by the consultants I brought on that DHR is not without reason in this area, and for sort of necessities for health and safety, they will work with you. So the example that was given is, if a building is found to be have structural issues that would make it dangerous, DHR is not going to disqualify your project because you had to suture some sort of steel support structure on to make it savable. So I think I can't tell you if it will be encapsulated, if it will be removed, but whatever is done will be done in conformity to the building code, the health and safety of our guests and the people working on the project, and sort of good sense, and done by an appropriately licensed asbestos remediation contractor. So thankfully, because it's non-friable, even in the event of removal, you'd have to put on a hazmat suit and a respirator, but the building itself wouldn't have to be tented, and that is a huge sigh of relief from a cost perspective.
Any other question, Pete?
I guess I got a question, and understand, sir, I think this is a wonderful thing, what you want to do, but at the same time, I still got questions that I'd like to know about. One of the questions, Lincoln, is I haven't heard anybody mention anything about DDQ, and DDQ can hold up a project a long time. And so if you're creating that pervious area where you're going to have runoff, and obviously that runoff is going to work its way to the river, and you got a scenic river and a trout stream that's recognized. What about that?
Well, I guess when we get to site plan, I don't know if they're going to be disturbing over an acre. Well, I guess
they
there will
gotta
be. So if there's disturbing over an acre, then that will, one of the engineering plans will be a stormwater plan that will be go to DEQ.
Yeah, but I will just add, and this was perhaps oversight on my part, when I was doing my initial introduction, I previously worked in state government for the Secretary of Natural Resources. So amongst our portfolio was the Department of Environmental Quality, as well as the Department of Historic Resources. So I don't know that I can necessarily share a piece of information that will totally comfort you that there will be no disruption from the stormwater management process, but it's definitely something we put a lot of thought into, and it's a relationship we plan to leverage to ensure project success.
It's who you know, yeah.
Yeah, but I just
Any
think
other
this,
question?
I think one thing we've all learned, and I've learned, just you disturb more than 10,000 square feet, you need an ENS permit. If you disturb more than an acre, it's going to go. You're going to go to DEQ. So,
Okay, any other question for the applicant? Daniel?
How many employees do you anticipate hiring?
That is a very good question. I guess it is a question that is partially informed by the answer to this zoning request. Clearly, a facility with more rooms will require more cleaning staff, more kitchen staff to service it. A big part of the reason we're requesting that new construction is it gives us more of a sort of per unit buffer to handle the amortization of staff on the site, as well as sort of added amenities that come with staff, say, a lifeguard. So I think any number I give you would be wrong, or would end up being wrong. But I will say, having previously worked in economic development, I have a keen appreciation that job creation is an important metric of project success and project impact on a community. And so our hope is not just to provide a good number of jobs that we certainly will, but to provide a high quality job, one that pays people a living wage, one that allows families not just to live, but to thrive in Madison County and hopefully stay. When I've talked to the neighbors, it was funny. I think 2 or 3 folks we talked to today said, my kids are getting near high school age. Can they have a summer job? Clearly, it's a little early to have kids under 18 going into an asbestos-filled school. But that is front and central. And I hope that employment is not, that we can build a business that is not sort of wholly seasonal, but carries people and carries that income through the off season. So that my goal is to have a strong enough business that we can, at the business level, absorb that seasonality to a certain extent and provide consistent, good wages throughout the year. I hope that.
Yeah, Pete.
I guess, and you don't know until you have your soil scientists evaluate it. Years ago, when I was on the board here, we went up and we dug a lot of holes, finding septic systems and what have you. That's real sandy, gravelly type soil up there that water just sucks its way right through. If we had to do an alternative system to make something work, when you do your soil work and you come back, you tell us where the discharge will be or what will be happening with the discharge if you have to do not a conventional system, but go to an alternative system.
Yeah, so I think in my previous conversations with the Board of Supervisors, it was my sense, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that direct discharge, if allowed, is viewed unfavorably. And so it is, as a good neighbor, it's my goal not to sort of maximally, I have a great lawyer, but my goal is not to maximally push the sort of legalistic or regulatory flexibility of any bounds. And that's partially why we don't have these firm answers. If we hit these inflection points, I think it'll be a business that will probably ratchet down our aspiration rather than ratchet up our septic system to the point we have to treat everything for drinking water standards and then discharge into the scenic waterway. I mean, just sort of on its surface, I think people will be coming to the hotel in large part because of the natural beauty that surrounds it. It would make very little business sense for us or ethical sense for me personally if we were deleterious to the health of that body of water that our livelihood depends upon.
Any other questions for yes, Mark?
Yeah, just in general. You said you're a developer. Are you looking to develop this and sell it or keep it or?
It's a funny thing. We've talked about this. I have developed I think 4 properties now, but I'm generally more of a refinancer than a seller, if that makes sense. When I do a project, it takes not just a fair amount of capital, but a whole lot of time, energy, personal effort, and it's hard for me to muster that purely in the pursuit of profit. It's because I've found something that interests me, and generally when I something interests me, it has to be pried from my cold dead hands. So my hope is to have it be a wildly successful enterprise that I would be a fool to part with at any price point.
So the thought could be to sell it after you get it.
I mean, I think my lawyer would have some harsh words for me if I made a commitment to you right now that I will hold this property for the rest of my life.
That's all.
But I have no plan to sell it at the end. My plan is to hang out there a whole bunch. So yeah, I mean, my plan is to hold on to it. Admittedly, restructuring its finances in order to get the cash out to continue the vision as it becomes a better collateralizable asset. It has more cash flow that opens up sort of further financing tranches. And this is something I've had initial and positive conversations with some commercial lending institutions about, though it is sometime down the road. I'm trying. They, like you, have questions that require further answers on my part. And so I'm trying to resist my tendency to forge as far down paths as humanly possible until I know that I'll have every question answered on that part. But that's our sense is that we'll be refinancing several times over the development process, but it'll maintain staying the ownership, I should say, of Kriglersville Elementary School LLC, not myself. There is a strong likelihood that shares of that business will need to be sold, A, to levy the capital to pursue these building projects to their fullest extent, but B, and this is really in the weeds, but the tax credits generated by the product, by the project can be claimed by active investors in the project. So part of the way the tax credits function as a funding mechanism is selling equity stakes in the project to folks who have the income necessary to claim these fairly substantial tax credits in exchange for the upfront cash needed to execute. So that's really in the weeds. Y'all are good sports to bear with me this long.
Steve,
Yes,
I will
Steve.
say, and I heard the gentleman say that in 95 and 96 of the flood, there was no water in the building. But those that lived here all of our life, there was water all the way around that building.
But not in it.
Not in it, all the way around it.
Well,
Don't mean that in a negative way.
yeah,
but
Philip, that is,
it was water all the way around it in 95 and 96. I was a young fellow then.
well,
We believe you.
yeah, you would know much better than me. I can't speak to that one way or another, but we are doing research into the historical record. The engineer actually, thankfully, is hitting the stacks over, I think, at the Madison Eagle to see if we can find a written account, any pictures we can find. We're talking to neighbors.
Right.
So we certainly, our goal is to uncover the truth, the whole
Understand.
truth, and nothing but the truth. So that if that is the case, we will find it. And we will figure out a way forward.
Any other question? Yes, thank you.
I'm Ashley Kyle. I am Felix's attorney on this issue. And just want to piggyback off of what Felix was saying. So we are right now within our 90-day feasibility period. So we're going through the process of examining the property very thoroughly. And so we will hope to have more answers to these questions and other questions that will arise potentially by your next work session, and then also by the date of the public hearing, which would be September 7th. So it is an ongoing process. And I also just want to say too, that these plans are conceptual in nature. I mean, they are just drawings right now. Nothing is set in stone. We are definitely going to take a look at the setback issue. That was an excellent question. And we'll do whatever we need to do to make sure that we are in compliance with the zoning ordinance as far as the setbacks go. I also must say though, that today was my first visit to the property. I actually live up in Ashburn, so I drove down and then took a look at it and talk about natural beauty. I mean, it is just gorgeous, and I can totally see a very successful wedding venue here, lodging. I mean, it is just, those views are just absolutely breathtaking. And so we will at 100%, maintain our best efforts not to cram a bunch of, patents in and maintain the natural beauty, for sure. I also just wanted to mention the septic issue is something that's part of our feasibility studies. We've talked to Emily Bourbon, I think, who's very helpful at BDH. And so she kind of set us on this path about what we're going to have to do in terms of whether it will be conventional versus an alternative septic system. So that is something that's under investigation right now. I'm not going to say at this point what it is, because we're still taking a look, but it is something that we're working hard to assess. And then also just, we talked a little bit at the beginning of the meeting about conditions, and so proffers that we would make as part of the package that we're presenting to you. So, these can be things like construction. I know there was a question about construction during the project, so we can proffer as to construction times, access to the property, storage of the construction. These are things that we will take into consideration and make proffers to you as you consider this rezoning application. Density in terms of the number of rooms, how many people are going to be on the property at any given time. These are things that we can discuss in the proffer, not to exceed a certain number. The use that we'll proffer to only use this property for lodging, retail, event, restaurant use, and for nothing else. And then you've also got the restriction that's going to be recorded in the land records that prohibits the equipment storage yard, and all of that. And then if there are any other ideas that you have for proffers, we're definitely going to be talking to Ligon more about that, and hope to put together kind of a preliminary package for you by the next work session, I would think. So are there any other questions?
Just a comment from Mr. Shapiro. Pleased to see that you're discussing this with the neighbors. Have you had primarily positive responses?
I will say it may not be a reflection of the project and instead a reflection of the deep hospitality of the people of Greenfield, but they have been uniformly positive. If anybody is unhappy with me, they have been exceedingly polite to the extent that I've totally missed it.
Good, that's an excellent start there, yeah. Any other question for the applicants? All right, thank you.
Exciting, actually. It's exciting. I talked there.
Okay. That brings us to the remainder of our agenda with old business. Hopefully, these are pretty nearly in the final stages here. I guess we'll just go ahead. Peter, would you introduce the short-term rental policy and the accessory dwelling unit ordinance that you've been working on?
Yeah, the substance of what's in the materials is what we have discussed prior to tonight. And there've been no changes in the substance. Ligon, with some minor help from me, codified these provisions, and that's what you see in the materials. But as I say, the substance is what we've talked about before. No change.
Excellent. Any question or comment for Peter about the short-term lodging or the accessory use dwelling?
I've got a comment about the ADUs.
Yes, Mike.
So after rereading this and all, under number 5, the height limitation,
Yeah. Which one, 5?
it,
You're on page.
I'm on ADU,
Page
page 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, Article 15-C-3.
I'm thinking that limiting this to the primary residence, I'm not too sure that that's going to be a real good idea. I'm thinking that supposing that it could be a 5-foot difference, just say. I mean, you're not going to be really looking at probably a 2-story building with a minimum of 800 square feet. But still, the primary residence could be built on a slab, say, and the next ADU might need to be built on block, just say. It needs to be 4 or 5 feet higher for different reasons other than that. Now, I'm just thinking that probably really doesn't really fit anywhere in there. I mean, because it's not going to be but so high, once again, with 800 square feet. If that makes any sense to anybody.
Yes.
Well, I mean, your point about the 800-foot limitation is certainly the primary restriction. The height limitation
provision is out of suggestions from AARP. And that's where it came from.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Does that make sense what I'm saying though? I mean,
There could be practical reasons.
yeah, I
not,
mean,
you
it
know.
could be a couple feet, but if we have put it in there, that's what they got to be held to, supposedly.
Well, I think there ought to be some height limitation.
Well, I mean, how high, I mean,
Um,
we got a building code that says that they can only be but so high anyway. And with 800 square feet as a limitation, you couldn't get but so high anyway. It would be just a straight up box.
Would it be practical to limit the number of stories rather than height?
Well, that could vary by
Yeah.
your
Well,
ceiling.
Once again, with
Still have-
800
still
square
have
feet, you're not
problems,
going to
yeah.
get but
You're
so
not gonna
much.
get- you're
Right.
not gonna be able to
Well,
have
I mean,
eight big ceilings.
Well, I think that, as I say, the primary limitation is the 800 square feet. If you put this on top of, say, a garage,
That was my other thought.
it might be
That was
deal
my other
higher
thought, that
than
you
a-
could do that. If
You
you
could.
say you've got a garage and you want to put this on top of the garage because it's already existing. So you're trying to maximize.
or
what you're
you
gonna
have a
spend.
barn, for example.
Sure. So therefore, this would limit you to doing that.
I would have no objection to just taking out that provision unless Legan has a thought. Legan, I'm
On the height?
suggesting in response
Well,
to.
if you're limited to 800 square feet, it's probably very unlikely that it's ever going to be more than one story.
I think that's a good point,
But,
Mike.
I mean,
I would have no objection to taking.
yeah,
that
I
out.
mean,
Does anyone else have a comment on that?
I mean, throughout the county, if you go out throughout the county, you see garages all the time and people build a unit on top of it for someone to live in. I mean, I know several spots here in the county where there's a log cabin slab on grade and the guy built his garage and then built an apartment over the top of it and he rents it. So, I mean, it happens frequently.
yeah, that's a good point, actually. That's true.
Mhm.
All right. So do we have a consensus that we take out 5?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
It sounds like we do, yeah.
Looks like we'll take out 5.
Thank you, Mike. Good point. Any other comment here?
Mr. Chairman, I was under the impression that we had eliminated number 8
Okay.
when we were talking about this at the last time.
Right.
The owner occupancy.
And that we were going to right. The other option was at the very end of the discussion was when we assigned the special use permit. That would be affected there that would go with the owner too. So that needs to be factored in somewhere.
I mean, it's not, I mean, just, it is not an unusual request. I know someone who's
You mean to have the
owner have to be on the site. I mean, it's not,
Mhm.
you know,
Well-
it's, but you know, whether or not you
you're
want to,
going to get, I think you're going to get pushback. You would get pushback from me if it worked, if I were involved.
so you think eliminating it, is that what you want?
Yes. Well, I think you need to make the special use go with the,
I think that would, I would be very much against that, Faye, for the reason that we discussed last time. And that is that if someone thinking about building an ADU doesn't like that provision, then they don't build an ADU.
but they may not necessarily build one. They already may have one or convert something already there. Or I can just think of a ton of scenarios and it doesn't involve building. And when we talked about it, and I agree with Pete as far as his example was if the building is owned or the house and the ADU is owned by a person who passes or has to go into, you know, a retirement community or whatever, comes down to her children, then what do you do with it? And they have to move there? The son who inherits it or the child?
Well, you could sell it.
But then
That's
whoever-
not what you want to do.
But whoever buys it, they're in the same
They're in
situation.
the same boat. Well, you
The-
might not. You're telling a person they buy a piece of land or buy a property or have the property or inherit the property and they have to live there. You have to move here. That just seems really strict.
If the original applicant is deceased, the special use permit goes with the original applicant. The property then, I mean, it can no longer be used as an accessory dwelling unit.
Well, let's just say they're not deceased. They say they're just going into a home or whatever. But they still want to retain ownership. I mean, why are you telling me that I own this land or I inherit this land even, and I want to use it as a rural property and that I have to move there? I just think that's very strict.
You can use it for other purposes. You just can't use it
As in,
for an ADU.
Yeah.
And there is very good logic behind that. And that is, unless you have an owner on the site, either in the primary unit or in the ADU, you're going to have less favorable conditions for neighbors. I mean, the research
But
shows that's a fact.
But if you have the special use for an ADU with that property and the owner not live there, but you put the emphasis on that, they're the ones responsible, just like every other issuance that we make. The owner is responsible even though he may not live there,
Well, but
like on a
that-
event
that-
venue or whatever.
That's missing the point, Faye.
I
If
think
an
we're being
owner
too
is on the
strict.
property, the likelihood is that the property is going to be better maintained than if the owner is not on the property.
Not our job.
If my mother goes into a nursing
It's not our
home and
job.
I'm paying $10,000 a month to keep my mom in a nursing home, she still owns the dwelling and she still owns the ADU. And now I can't rent either one of them because she don't live on the property. And I'm
No, you
trying
could
to
rent the
raise-
house. You just
You can
can't rent the
But
ADU.
I
Right.
can't, but I want to rent both of them
Yeah, I
to create
understand.
enough income to keep my mom in the nursing home.
Yeah, I mean,
And
Mr.
if
Chairman,
one-
I
I
say we
mean,
take a straw poll.
I think ordinance handle it either way. Some don't require it. I would say probably most do, but again, it's just, I think Pete's right. Just take a vote.
I haven't
I mean,
researched enough.
Mr. Chairman, take a straw poll, please.
yeah, I think at this point, that's the best thing to do. We're this close to completing this. Those who, let's see the hands of those who would like to just remove number 8 on Article 15C-3. 4, 5. Okay, we've got 5. Those who would like to keep it. 2. Okay, it looks like, for now at least, let's take number 8 off of there then.
Well, it would
No.
be number 7 since
It-
we've taken off.
Already taken
Right.
one off. Okay, yeah. Take the owner occupancy off.
Now,
Okay.
may I say
Yeah.
something?
Yeah.
Okay, one other thing, and I don't know, I guess I need to think a little bit more now. If we don't do that, have we covered with our other conditions and restrictions and whatever enough to make sure that the property is maintained? But I'm not sure. I just think it's on the owner, whomever. I just think it
Yeah.
has to be on the owner, just like an event venue, just like this fellow here who's come with this. It's on him to see that things run well, and that things are taken care
But
of.
aren't you the advocate for not
I don't want that. I don't want him to have to live
telling
there.
on your neighbor? Who's going to enforce that if the owner is
Nope.
living somewhere else?
We shouldn't have to have it enforced if it's on the owner. Any diligent owner is going to take care of their property and they're going to see that it's run right. Believe me, I'm dealing with it right now.
Well, but-
You're forgetting the possibility of absentee ownership here.
We're
That's
not
what
coming to
Peter's talking
this
about.
Well-
as the first people who have ever done
No,
this, Faye.
well, I'm not changing my
The
mind.
the experience with ADUs nationwide, as chronicled in the literature, is that you ought to have an owner occupancy requirement in either the primary unit or the ADU.
I don't see, I don't agree with that. I don't see where it is. Where do you find that? Tell me where I can go read it.
Look up the AARP literature on this.
AARP, I'm sorry. I need something more than that.
they have done more writing and research
well,
on this
I
issue
don't-
than
all right.
anyone else.
When
Well-
is this going to come up, Ligon?
If the SUP
So-
goes with the applicant,
I
which
mean,
is what we're saying,
yeah, I mean, it's
that
something,
should eliminate the question here.
Yes.
yeah.
Well,
I mean,
I'm
and
just
it's really
saying,
something that can be
right.
explored at the special use permit. But I mean, Yeah.
So I think,
but I don't think there's anything wrong with removing it, but I would tend to.
well, that's why I just mentioned it. I guess thinking, maybe I shouldn't think out loud. I'm a little tired.
So if it
been
goes
around
with the
a couple of days.
applicant, who's it gonna fall back on with the
But-
next person?
I want to, I just, so I ask you, when is this
They have
coming up for
coming.
sure? Just want to make sure that we are covering, doing our due diligence on how we make sure that it's still on the owner though. No matter how you
Yeah,
look at it.
the owner ultimately maintains the property, but
Yes. But he didn't have to live there.
yeah, I mean, I do sort of tend to agree with Peter a little bit that, yeah, I think it is prevalent in the AD
Just can't
ordinances.
Tell me I have to live there when
Yeah,
I own it.
but I understand your
Just
perspective. I
saying.
do think most AD ordinances probably require an owner to live on site. I mean, that I would agree with, but
I'll
it doesn't
take
mean we
time
have to.
look at it, too.
Yeah, but again, Faye, if the ADU applicant leaves or sells or is deceased, whichever happens,
Then it
the
starts
SUP
over.
is gone.
It starts over. That's right.
No, it's not starting over unless
Well-
somebody applies again. It is now a single piece of real estate.
Absolutely, and I agree. That's fine.
It-
That's fine.
We're not going to solve this
No.
tonight.
No.
We ought to put this as an alternative and raise it with the board, let them decide it.
Okay.
It's a
Yeah.
very important question. And as I say, I think research
There's
supports.
already a way a way to enforce this. We have a zoning office. And if you move in there into that ADU and you trash the place and I'm your neighbor and you got trash everywhere and rats running around, whatever, I'm going to call Ligon's office and say, look, come do something about this. And that's what the enforcement's for the county.
What can he do?
But he can do enforcement. I mean,
How many people have sat here and say we don't rat on our neighbors?
Well, that's
Right.
not ratting on
you
your
move
neighbor.
in next to me and create a
That's
jump hole and
exactly
see if I
what it
rat
is.
on you or
That's
not.
right. That's not the same thing.
You can believe I'm going to rat on you.
That's not the same thing.
Listen,
With
what can
regard-
you do? What can you do? The
First
county
offense
does
is
not have the
$250.
maintenance code.
Well, I mean, if you have a junkyard, I mean, if you have more than 200 square feet of scrap metal, I mean, there's things that we just took one to court recently, but it has to get, it has to be pretty egregious. So I don't really think the maintenance of the property is a big
I don't either.
concern. I think it really,
I mean, even so, the only way you can do anything without the county having adopted the maintenance code is civil court.
that's right.
That's right.
That is correct.
That's right.
Mr.
And-
Chairman, a couple of points.
Yes.
I kind of get the impression that this is somewhat unfamiliar territory. I would commend people to look at what Fauquier County has done. I would look at what the city of Charlottesville has done. I've prepared these, put them in a binder for my own use, just in terms of the practical ways that these things work. To the point with regard to enforcement, Mr. Elliott, the challenge we have is, it is largely, reported by other citizens. Do we want to put other citizens in the position of creating additional, anxiety or tension in the neighborhood? I'm guessing the answer to that question is no. The other part of it is that, the second offense zoning violation would be $750. The first offense is $250. In order for us to enforce these things, as a practical matter, they're in general district court. It requires my time, it requires Mr. Webb's time, and typically one other witness. My point is that if we are having to enforce these things, we may find that it is not cost effective to do so. Kind of like towns that try to enforce their parking ordinances. They don't have meter readers because, you get $12, really going to pay somebody $30 an hour to enforce that sort of violation. One of the things that we need to look at whenever we are passing anything is what is the enforcement costs of our ordinances. That said, I'm happy to leave this binder with anybody who may be interested. It is by no means comprehensive. One of the things that is kind of interesting, and I did not verify this, the definition of accessory dwelling unit in the state code and I did not update this. I literally found this about 4 hours ago. An accessory dwelling unit is within the footprint of the house. In other words, it's kind of a duplex type thing, or the dreaded mother-in-law suite. And that's what accessory dwelling units typically referred to. The building code used to use that terminology. Whether they have updated it since 2018, I don't know the answer. But again, and I have not been involved in this process, as I think you all know. I'm happy to leave these resources to whomever wants them.
I'll take them.
This
I
body,
want my binder back.
So the state has a definition that means it's within the footprint of the house.
I will just read you the materials that I got. I think these are from the Virginia DHCD. And it says, although detached living structures are commonly referred to as ADUs, the new United States Building Code definition only includes ADUs that exist within a two-family dwelling. That can be an attached ADU with a shared wall, an interior conversion of an attic, basement, or other room to an ADU, an above garage converted space, or a garage that had been converted to an ADU. For USBC purposes, a detached dwelling unit would simply be considered a separate dwelling. And one of the things that you can do, you just change your definition so that when people are enforcing the Madison County ordinance, we have a definition that modifies ADU to mean what we intended to mean.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't think that changes or what we've written, because that's a building code and that's correct. I mean, the ADU is a dwelling, and we've said a residential living unit, complete independent living facilities, a kitchen, bathroom, that is describing a dwelling. We refer to it as an ADU. So that's from the building code. That wasn't, I don't think it's a state code. That's the part of the uniform building code. So I don't think that really in any way changes what we put forward. I mean, other communities use ADU term. So
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
we could beat this up and beat this
Yeah,
up, and we've
yeah.
already beat it to death. It's time to let these guys behind us, we're a recommending board. It's time to let these guys behind us decide what they want to do,
yes.
in my opinion.
Well, you know, I tend to be a literalist, and I hate to see us using a term that's already defined by the state that doesn't match what we're saying. So is it possible that we could simply use a different term? I'm kind of curious. I mean, Peter, your research has shown that nationwide, the definition that you've got is pretty common.
Right.
So why is it an entirely different definition in the state building code?
is well,
And remember, Mr. Chairman, my research is, while it's only 4 hours old, I cannot confirm that it is state-of-the-art research. It's what came up, in connection with my Google search of the term. But,
Yeah,
but
but-
having said that,
The likelihood that they've changed is small, I would say.
well, I mean, it is an extra dwelling. I mean, it's a single family dwelling. It's just, I'm looking at state code. I don't, the term accessory dwelling, it is in the building code. And what it's saying is it's a single family dwelling.
Yeah, but do we normally take everything out of the building code and put it in the
No,
ordinance?
no, we don't.
I don't think so.
I mean, it's a separate dwelling. This is what it is. We're just calling it an ADU, what so many other communities call them ADUs.
So a separate unit that does not have to be on the footprint of the original home.
It can or it doesn't have to
Right,
be.
can or
Right,
cannot.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're doing what right in line with other communities.
Yeah. To Pete's point, then, should we stop beating this up and move on?
I agree.
Yes. Okay. Any object to that?
So I guess what I can do is, we've got it codified. If the board,
Mhm.
maybe at the next, Jonathan, at the next board meeting, can take what's codified, let them look at it. And if they want to move forward with advertisement, we could have it, we could do it September or October. Yeah, depending on our workload.
Okay, based on that, do we still want to remove that owner occupancy? We had the straw poll. Okay, we'll go with that. And the two items we removed, and then go forward with what we got there. Okay.
But we will follow Mike's initiative on the height.
The height, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, and then present it for the, for the board. Okay, any other comment on that? All right, okay, I think, okay, if I can get back to my third page here. That would bring us up to your presentation, Faye,
Well,
after
okay.
many months of work here.
Right, and I will start, and Ligon's input, Ligon, you speak up. We had our meeting after our last discussion to change a few things, be consistent about some terms, make sure and look at the two definitions at the very beginning. This is in our packet now, that Ligon prepared, which are the private road easement or private road, and then the private road maintenance agreement,
Mhm.
which will definitely be in our proposed ordinance. So getting to the next, and I will say that all of us have received from Peter, a lot of suggestions for terminology, some of which was not only in our, is it on? Now it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, now it sounds like it. Some of which were in our original, well, as we've gone through this, and then Peter had some other issues with some words, different words, making sure we're using shall when we should, and things like that. So I don't know, Ligon, if we need to go through those, somebody needs to make sure. I didn't find anything of any great disagreement over meaning. Okay, so what we are adding, making sure that family subdivisions are all part of the road construction. Okay,
And the maintenance agreement.
and then also that the family subdivisions are included in the road maintenance. So in other words, family subdivisions comes along with all of this. We are recommending that, and we say it in the bold, the creation of a new private road or the extension of an existing private road shall be subject to review by the zoning administrator, planning commission, and final approval by the board of supervisors or its designee. And making the little paraphrase there about the limited to the particular subdivision. In other words, this doesn't mean it's for anybody else or any other road or any other proposition. All right, where's the next thing? All
Ms. Zoot, before you go forward,
right,
this could well be in our ordinance. It just doesn't read right to me. If you look at the bottom of Article 4, Section 8, I guess paragraph 1, private road subdivision.
in our ordinance,
Yeah, it says that it implies that the county, on the next to last paragraph of 4-8-1, just above 4-8-1A, it says is accepted into the state secondary system by the Board of Supervisors.
no,
Lincoln, I defer to
That's-
you, I thought that it was
no, we don't do
VDOT's
that. We don't do
responsibility.
that, yeah.
But we say the Board of Supervisors.
Right. That's what's in the code.
That's in the code right now.
So,
I suspect we need to amend that.
right, it would, because VDOT was the one who accepted it. I mean, if we
No,
want
we
to
know
just,
that VDOT has to do it. Yeah, that part was never changed from our original code.
Ligon, could I ask a question on that? And maybe Clay can respond to this. If you want to put it in this state system though, don't you have to go in front of the board and the board approves it and then it goes into the 6-year look ahead or something or other? I don't think you can get it in the state system
Well,
unless the board approves it.
I think you get it in the state system by building it to state standard. I think this is what this is talking about. You're building a state road, state standard, and they would approve it. And then if they approve it, they take it into the system. I think
But the board still has to approve it, correct?
you have to approve the subdivision.
They have to approve the road and the subdivision.
Is the subdivision and the bonding process, because the understanding is they would be building this to VDOT standards, you hold that bond, so the board would have some involvement. VDOT would have the option to say whether it meets their criteria.
Whether they accept it or not, right?
Correct.
But they do, I'm sure they have to have approval. That's all that means. I mean, it's been there for how many years?
And I'm not suggesting we go down this pig trail, but I just want to make sure that somebody remembers after this meeting, because I could, well, very easily forget that 4-8-1, we need to consider whether the process set forth in that next to the last paragraph of 4-8-1 is an accurate statement as to how the process works. And if it's not, we need to modify.
We need to do that. Yes, we did not look into the process.
I understood. I just,
Yes.
Yeah, I think
sorry to interrupt your train of thought.
Yeah.
No, no,
I just
that's
want to make
fine.
sure we have.
Yeah. We, as the process has gone through this painful details, there's lots like that needs to be looked at. Yeah, this was just to meet this particular directive right now. There's a whole lot of things in here that need to be at least adjusted so that they match other parts of the code.
Remember, this is 50 years old.
Yeah.
And
Still
I'm-
young, yes,
Um,
compared to us.
And so the one statement that is important to include, we do several times, the one before 1-8-1A, is that we will not,
Mhm.
we are not, the county is
County's
not
not
responsible for any maintainment or improvement or anything of a private road unless it's public.
And that is
That's supposed to
currently
be
in our-
printed.
That is currently in our code.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's in the
yeah.
code and it's supposed to be printed everywhere so that, they're instructed to do that.
All right, I'll stop talking.
So, okay, so when we get to 4-1, this is 4-8-1A. This is where the new stuff is. So 1A is, Ligon, why don't you speak to this?
So here, we're just kind of codifying what's in the state, what we already do.
Yeah.
We're referencing state code. So land disturbance of equal to 1 acre or less than 1 acre as part of a larger common plan of development or sale, ultimately disturbs 1 or more acres, shall submit a common plan of development to the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality. So if you're doing over an acre, you have to do that common plan. If you're doing a development, multiple lots, you got to remember the guy on James City Road last year, he had to submit a common plan because he was doing more than an acre and multiple lots. But it's possible that you'd be doing less than an acre, but it really wouldn't be, you'd have minimum 3 acres in R1. But if it was an R1 lot, I mean, everything that's a development here is going to be over an acre. So it's going to need if you're creating multiple lots, you're going to need a common plan of development that goes to DEQ. So, and B, subdivision located on existing private roads, which additional lots and or additional single-family dwellings on existing parcels are introduced in accordance with Article 483. And 483 talks about, that 483, again, just looking at the Crawford, that
But-
talks about that 8 lots, you can do up to 8. I know that number could be subject to change.
But
Mhm.
before that, let's go back up to 4-8-1D.
B,
D, have you skipped over? I mean,
I'm on B.
oh, you're on B. Okay.
I'm just going to work down through it.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean, because we need to talk about D.
So subdivisions located on existing private roads in which additional lots and or additional single-family dwellings on existing parcels are introduced in accordance with Article 483, okay, are subject to these A, B, these bolded ones we're looking at right now, and D.
Right. And 6-2-2, which is the road maintenance.
Right, and it talks about the road maintenance agreement, and that also talks about the best practice guide, the dirt and gravel road best management practice guide, published by the Culpeper Soil and Water Conservation District.
Okay.
Faye, I've got a,
Well, I want to finish before you say something. Have you finished D yet? Are we still on B?
I'm gonna be on C, a new subdivision of an existing
Right.
parcel or the extension of existing private road accommodating additional subdivided parcels per Article 483, and that's where we say you can have 8 on a private drive, which are not subject to Article 481 of this ordinance, a common plan of development, which I think is going to be very unlikely, shall be required to submit an agreement in lieu to construct a single-family dwelling, including family subdivision. So if it's not large enough, so you're adding just one parcel to an existing road, you're going to extend a road, you have to submit that agreement in lieu, which says you're going to follow the stormwater plans, you're going to construct the road, the drive in accordance to the best practices in the Culpeper Soil and Water Conservation District. So again, that's what's already done. If we go to D, again, we're repeating these all over again in accordance with Articles 41A, B, C, 483, and additional ones of this ordinance. All subdivisions located on private roads shall be constructed in accordance to the dirt gravel road best management practice guide.
All right.
Now, it was 2019, but we decided to take out the date and just, if it is updated, then that would.
And also, Ligon, I thought we were going to put shall be constructed to a minimum of these standards, leaving room for better.
Okay.
And also that we had a statement that said something or as, yeah, right?
Okay. So
Mike,
to a
Steve, you were
minimum.
there. We said as also or as designed, was that the word you call it? Designed by engineer.
Or as designed by
Well, whatever the
licensed-
words should be. for
We always
that.
use licensed engineer.
Whatever you call him.
Yeah, the last draft that you submitted had that extra sentence on it, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So we
Well-
want the minimum, so that we're not, so that we don't have to be, this is a minimum. We can accept better, more detailed, and then, or it can be coming from an engineer if somebody hires someone to do it, to develop their
I still
road.
say PE is better
Okay,
than a licensed
by a
engineer.
professional engineer,
Yeah.
a licensed
Professional
professional engineer.
Right, whatever you need to say.
To be a PE stamp, they have to be licensed. So if you say PE or put a professional engineer there. While we're at that, one of Peter's suggestions, I think, in line with dropping the date, he suggested using then current.
Mhm. And we
and
talked about
gravel
that,
road.
right?
And while we're at that sentence, we might as well put that in there.
In accordance to a minimum,
In accordance
constructed
with the.
at a
then-
minimum,
With
yeah, at a
minimum standards
yeah, in
of,
accordance with,
as outlined in
with the current.
current. That'll be
or
fine.
then-
We talked about that, yes.
Okay.
I'm just curious, is that a titled handbook?
Yes.
Okay.
I still don't like that.
Well, it
At
is
all.
what it is.
And I've called 3 different engineers, ranging from in this area and down in Virginia Beach, and I could not find anything in writing that says how to build a good private road.
and this
Which is
book
why I
certainly
couldn't
don't
find
tell you,
anything.
this book
Yeah.
is about erosion.
Right.
Yeah.
But that,
So we're
that's-
just talking about erosion when you're talking about making a standard for building a road. You're talking about erosion here. That's why this is really not doing what we wanted to do, I don't think.
So how this came about, if you
it's a
remember,
start.
was that
That's- yeah.
Well,
that our oh gosh, was Matt Ayler. Who was he?
Erosion.
No, he's the one who goes out and inspects, our inspector of this. That's what he recommended, right, Ligon? I mean, this is
Yes.
what he uses.
For soil and erosion,
Yeah.
not for.
Well, he
actual
said for
construction.
roads.
Well,
And if he
Because they're
wasn't
disturbing
talking about
land.
roads, why did we ever go there? I wasn't there that day. I mean, I talked to him for a long time, but
well, to Mike's point, which is valid, and in fact, we discovered the same thing. When we started doing research,
right.
there simply isn't anything available that we could find.
And if
And this at least gave us something to work with.
And
Yeah.
and if that's what Matt is using, then that seemed to work for us. The other thing was we started out at first with a licensed
Mhm.
professional engineer, period. That's who had to give you the road. Private road, had to design it. You're gonna build one or improve it, you came in with his drawings.
He asked the question, if ultimately you're wanting to build this road to VDOT standards, why aren't you using VDOT standards to build it?
But we don't necessarily ultimately want to do that necessarily. I don't.
No, the private roads, as they're defined here, are exempted from the VDOT standards.
No, I mean, I
They're not
wouldn't.
intended to be taken into the VDOT system.
They're supposed to be privately constructed and maintained.
Privately constructed, privately
With a maximum of
maintained.
8 or 6 or whatever on the.
So we don't have to use this if somebody decides we don't want to, and we put it back to the engineer.
Well,
Period.
To my way of thinking, the advantage of leaving this in here is at least it gives you a foothold. Because right now there isn't anything. And at least we're codifying the fact that this is the inspection that's going to be done.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Yes,
Point
yes.
of privilege. And I don't want to switch screens because it'll probably mess up what Alan has going on back there. But I just brought up the dirt and gravel road standards. It does go beyond erosion. It talks about crowning of the roads, the depths of gravel, culverts. I mean, the geotech fabric. It covers a plethora of items as it pertains to private roads.
Yeah, but, and again, what Mike is referring to is the fact that if you look at some of the more stringent standards, I guess you would say, that end up for paved roads.
Sure.
They specify the aggregate material quality, they specify compaction, lots of things like that, which have to do with how sturdy and how well built the actual road structure is.
Correct. You'll
But-
get into nuclear density testing
yeah.
and things
Right.
like that when you're
Right.
doing a state road.
But
Mr.
the
Wheatley.
committee couldn't find any national or state standards that we could use to address that.
Yes, sir.
The one thing that I didn't read in the book that I think is the most important thing there is when you're building the road is we're running a compaction test, or we're at least loading a dump truck and doing a proof roll test to see if we got a good roll base. And I looked all through that book and I couldn't find that in there anywhere. And I mean, I don't know how you put that in this, but that's one of the most important things there is in a road.
Sure. Probably though in a VDOT standard
But
road.
in a private road, by putting a proof roll test on it, you can tell, Matt or whoever goes out can tell if they got a solid road base.
Sure.
So,
What you're going to get is someone's extending a driveway for lots is an extended driveway that you're going to access now. Unless you cite that, and I agree with Mr. Kelly, you would normally want elements, but unless you're going VDOT standards, my opinion, that's up to the Planning Commission and board, unless you cite VDOT standards, you're going to get somewhat of a minimum design effort, which should at least definitely not cause erosion issues. So I guess it all depends on your direction where you're trying to go. If it's a VDOT standard mechanism that you're looking for. So this would be, in my opinion, your best effort if you're staying away from a VDOT road and bridge standard guide, probably your closest thing to trying to address issues with the private road.
Well, the other thing too is they have to bring that road maintenance agreement to us. And when we look at that, we can say, hey, this works, or hey, it don't.
And we got one, for example, we've been reviewing Woodbrook Estates, for example, is off Route 230. But that was formed via HOA, but they have a road maintenance agreement, but it doesn't even get into you will do X, Y, and Z far as design. It's just you pay some money to handle maintenance on the road.
Because it doesn't talk about standards in it for the road construction.
Correct.
Right.
I think this is probably the best thing we can do.
Okay, so definitely for sure, if anybody wants to come up with anything better without a whole 3 pages of engineer stuff, minimum for the dirt and gravel road best practices, and also accepting them from an design from a certified, whatever the term is, licensed professional engineer. Okay, that's the effort, that's the intent.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure that
Thank you, Sean. This is actually very similar to the best practices thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and
Well,
then
let's go back to Mike's point that in the dirt and gravel handbook, we've got a standard. But Mike made the point earlier that you asked 3 engineers, licensed engineers, and you're going to get 3 different answers. So the question is, isn't it better to stay with the dirt and gravel standards? So we have one standard that we can apply.
but even that, at least we hope that somebody's looking at the site that the road is being built on, the kind of roads there and et cetera, so that,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the one thing about getting it to a licensed engineer. They'll do it to the site, like my road on Hillside, et cetera, is very different than my neighbor's, which is much newer and accepting all that runoff and whatever. And his road's very different from mine. He adjoins mine.
That's why.
And yet the roads are very different and they need to be built differently because his takes on different water than mine does. So if you don't build it that way, then you've got a problem. So I don't know how to get around that, except you just got to.
Well, that's why it's important to have that sentence in there about allowing the use of the professional engineer.
Yes, allow a professional engineer, and hopefully they built it according to the standards of it.
The other thing we've got to consider, it's probably economically prohibitive to require the full VDOT standard for the road for somebody that's building a 4-house subdivision.
Or improving one. Remember, we have the requirement for anything is added, whatever, they have to bring all the road up to standard.
It's going to be prohibitively expensive.
That's the big thing in this. Okay. So 8.3 is another 4.8 no more than 8 lots coming up from 4. That's a biggie. Okay, that's another one. So that's kind of self-explanatory. And the reason we chose 8, I'll explain that again. We're coming up from 4. We had a couple of members that thought 6. We already have a lot of roads here that already have 6. They never were counted or they're early. Anybody wants to do anything, that'll stop them right there. We aren't helping the people that we kind of want to give a little break to about our farmers, our people who have land and don't want to sell 600 acres at one time. They just want to sell some land to make money enough to keep themselves. And I personally know people like that. So I know, I think the 8 would be fine. I don't want to see it go bigger necessarily, but I certainly think going not that large, we're not helping anybody. We're not really making it. Too many of our roads already have 6. So at least you're giving them 2 more. I don't know. That's my opinion. Trying to help out our farmers, our people with some land that can't do anything with otherwise. All right, I think that's basically what we have in this at that point. Now we just need to go on now to the road design, the standards and all of that. And the road maintenance.
Ms. Zutz, if I could interrupt.
Sure.
I did find a resource while sitting here. I think it's from the Forest Service. It's, if anybody wants to write down the site, it is www.fs.fed.us. And then it says Forest MGMT. projects. It's chapter 4, low volume roads engineering, road engineering. It talks about some of the engineering for low volume roads, and it discusses some of the best practices.
Reference.
It's the reason I mention it is really prompted by Mr. Elliott's point and Mr. Snyder's point that we're still looking for standards. I guess my point is that there are standards that are apparently available. The Colorado Department of Transportation, among others, has alternate standards for low volume roads. I think what we're really talking about here are low volume roads. And if we're talking about low volume roads, it might be appropriate, again, if there is an engineering standard in any of these, that we consider inclusion of that.
Okay.
That was much more common out west, and those tended to be public roads, including the ones that the Forest Service.
Forest Service.
Well, if I,
Sure, but the key, I think, is that they are low volume. which
Yeah.
is Really what, and it doesn't really matter who owns it. It's a high volume or low volume, the standard is typically different. I've been on some roads that are not nearly so nice as Interstate 5, that are within 2 miles of Interstate 5 whenever you're on the west coast.
and if I may add, Mr. Chairman, you can go in that road guide. They actually cited all the references they use to make up that.
Right.
Forestry's in there, conservation's in there, some other places. So there may be other sources cited beyond the material that was included in here, that additional websites for you to look at.
Well, it still brings us back to the point. Do we want to continue this process and try another 5 months to find
out the right standard for
or
whatever Madison
proceed
County
with
needs?
this? Yeah.
Or do we want to go with something better than what we have and at least start there and raise our numbers of lots up to 8? And the rest of this is pretty much standard. I mean, it was in our old standards. Now we're at 6.1. I'm skipping down. And we have all the numbers again, as Ligon has referenced. They follow standards. Now, 6.2. Let's see. Oh, this is except for, all right, 6.2-1. 6-2-1. We're saying up to 8 lots again. And we tell them where they need to go. Ligon, will you talk to 6-2-2?
So here we're just saying that if you create a new subdivision, you're going to have a maintenance agreement. If you add, and I say new subdivision, you're making 4, 6, 8, whatever lots, you're going to have a maintenance agreement. If you add to a private drive or access easement, you're going to produce, if that does not have a maintenance agreement, you're going to produce a maintenance agreement. Also, if you were to add another dwelling, like Mike Moscow was kind of talked about a lot. The Moscow clause.
Moscow clause, yeah.
If you're adding a dwelling, but you're not subdividing, then you would produce a maintenance agreement.
In addition.
And that's what that underline.
Right. In addition to bringing the road up to standards, the standard that we require now.
Right. So
That's part of it.
I guess the idea is if you're going, right now it's 4. We don't require anybody to have a maintenance agreement. If you're looking to extend something, add more houses to it, which is really, if that's something that you're interested in doing, that you would get everyone else on the road to join you. But if you could not, the existing road, then you would take responsibility for that maintenance.
Yeah, if you look at one of the requirements on the very last page, the way it was stated and some of the things I found, it had a percentage. Where is that? I don't see it here. Unfortunately, I didn't grab my other. The one that says you either, part of the road maintenance agreement says how the funds will be assigned or percentage of. There was something there, and I don't see it here right now, do I? Oh, yes, it is. Shall be shared equally or in specified percentages for dwelling unit owners. That's an agreement they have to come to. So if you're the first one on the road, you don't have very much to maintain. Maybe you only pay 10%. Okay? If you want to, if you will join. But we're not requiring anybody to. Bottom line is, it has to be done. And the guy at the bottom is the one that wants it, is the one that has to create it and make it happen. And we just made all right, so let's go back here again. What we're trying to say in this 6.-2-2, and then if you have something, please say it. If a road is extended or improved or added to, or in any way a house is added to it, including family subdivisions, they have to go through the standards, upgrading it, and have a road maintenance agreement, develop a road maintenance agreement.
Yeah, did you?
Bottom line.
Did you find that clause about the percentages?
Yeah, I did.
Okay,
C.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
Right.
Equally or specified percentage.
Or in specified percentages.
Yeah.
So that just opens it up to whomever, you have to come to some agreement.
It can be
It's gonna-
99%.
It can be 99.
Hey, Faye,
Yes.
so what about, so I'm an existing property owner and somebody else wants to make their driveway. They're gonna make me
No,
do this.
no.
It can be.
But I thought
one.
that's what it said.
They may have to, no, it doesn't. It says the responsibility for construction shall be shared equally or in specified percentages for dwelling unit owners abutting such roads. And if it means that your percentage is 0, you refuse to sign, you want to be a jerk about it and not help with the road. No, I'm just
saying,
kidding.
I think I'll read, if a new single-family dwelling is proposed in an existing lot located on an established
Yes,
private
you
road-
have that in there.
private road, so you want to establish private road in which, that's which no subdivision proposed, in which no subdivision proposed, a private road maintenance agreement shall be required. At minimum, new private road maintenance agreement shall include the property owners petitioning for the subdivision or the property owners proposing to construct additional single-family dwelling on the existing lot without a subdivision. On said private road, all subsequent property owners petitioning for an additional subdivision or new single-family dwelling on an existing lot without a subdivision shall be required to adjoin the existing private road maintenance agreement. Private road maintenance agreement shall be presented in conjunction with the survey plat and reviewed by the county attorney. So if it's an existing private road and somebody else wants to add another house, not you, Mike, but someone else, or subdivide another parcel off that a lot, maybe it's the 7th one on that, then they would be responsible. And it's actually the line of where it's underlined, that paragraph above. When additional lots are created in accordance to 483 the subdivision ordinance on an existing private road where no such private road maintenance agreement exists, a private road maintenance agreement shall be created and, when possible, include all lots utilizing the existing private road. If and when possible, but
When
Who
possible.
enforces this?
You have to establish that
In order
in order to get this
Subdivide.
done.
it's a subdivision. Or
It would be part of the zoning administrator's responsibilities. Do you want the word adjoin shall be required to adjoin? I mean, the lot is adjacent, whether you make
That's
it
one of the
adjacent.
points I
I
made,
think the
yeah.
word is probably join the existing.
join.
Well.
Where are you?
It is a word. I looked it up and it does actually mean what Ligon said it meant, but it's not a
Does it
common
mean
word.
something different from join?
Adjoin in this particular case means literally that you would add it to something that's already there.
Next
It's an
door.
archaic term,
Next,
though.
adjoin.
Yeah, I've got to admit that my dictionary is from 1960, so.
That-
I can say join, but that's what I meant, is just
Yeah,
adjoin.
Adjoin. The adjoining room, that's the room next door.
More pertinently, I guess, is there
Way I use
some
it.
appropriate legal terminology
Ad-
to
ad-
say that?
I would consider a join meaning attached.
Yeah, it's next door usually, yeah.
Well.
Where is that, where is that?
this is not-
I
This
mean,
is not a joint.
So you
this
just
is
hold the
adjoint.
agreement
Adjoin,
beside you and you're
adjoin.
adjoining it?
That's right, adjoining.
Where's that word at again?
3 lines above.
Three lines up in the middle.
So just put join.
If you want to say join,
Well,
adjoin is fine. Adjoin is a real word and I use it.
Adjoin the
Let's-
agreement.
yeah, let's make sure that's what we want it to mean, though.
I mean, just come a part of the agreement.
So the bottom line on, let's get this straight again too, because our lawyer has definitely reminded us that we cannot require people to do something that maybe they weren't a part of it the first and whatever. So if you are part of a road and somebody wants to add to it, which they can do, somebody owns land behind you and they're going to be selling some lots and adding a road. They have to create a road maintenance agreement besides bringing the whole road up to standard, even in front of your house. You'll be lucky. You get to have your road because you can't have a road that's got a gap in it. So he has to pay for it.
Well, and here's the problem, and I drafted a lawsuit this morning on this very issue.
And tell us how
Where
it's going to go.
somebody, basically they pulled a fast one on an adjoining county's subdivision people, where there was a private road. Somebody just added 10 more units on the back end of the private road. They
Mhm.
don't have this 4-on-1 type of limitation. And these people, they're trying to bring in some mobile homes, and they're using the existing road. The neighbors, as you might guess, are up in arms. Part of the problem with that is they didn't build the road. They didn't build the road to where they are. They're getting full benefit of the efforts of other people in terms of years of maintenance and construction. And so it's really not unreasonable for the people who own near the front end, who are the ones who built the road in the first place, to get the advantage of it. And frequently those people don't even use the road. Some of them, they have driveways where they just go across, a rural rustic road where there's not even a ditch. And so, I think the suggestion that the people living at the front are somehow bad neighbors, I think is not really considering what those people have done to get the road in the first place.
Well, it depends on who owns the road at first.
Well, it depends on whether they're jerks or not.
Well,
But
it depends on
owning
whether they
the
own it or
property has
not.
nothing
Yeah.
to do with whether
Because a
they're
lot of
jerks.
roads, the road already went by there. I mean, that was already maintained. I mean,
I'm more interested that 10 lots are coming onto a private drive.
oh, wow.
And they're all owned by mobile home.
Now, do they have a maintenance, like a private one, or is it a county one?
Nothing.
or-
No, it's all before any of that was required.
Well, see, so now,
we're-
so really do we have a problem with someone? New roads, no problem. It's existing road that gets added to, which we're trying to give the benefit of some of these people who have land that's landlocked right now that can't do anything with.
Well, he's got to bring us
Francois.
a maintenance agreement, Clay, and.
That's right.
You deal with the
But I
maintenance
mean, though,
agreement from where you
but
left
if you-
off back.
But if you are at the, all right, let's go all the way back to the construction requirement. Bringing it up to some standard to get it extended or added to. But if you're at the very beginning and you don't want it to be extended, are you going to fuss about that even though you don't have to do anything? Because the burden's going to be on the new person, right? The person who
Well-
wants it.
Well, and that's, again, one of the challenges with this type of change. There are probably people on these roads who don't want any more houses on these roads. And that's something that the Board of Supervisors is going to have to weigh. I'm not certain because I haven't looked at it in a couple of months, but I think the comprehensive plan says that one of the things that we're trying to preserve is exactly this type of thing. And this does represent a material change in policy for Madison County. The point of that, though, is if I don't want anybody if I'm living on a road, I bought my house thinking that there were allowed to be 4 houses, and I'm in the, and, 4 houses, I mean, you're either at the beginning or the end of the road, assuming that there are houses on each side. But if that's the case and I don't want it, I'm not going to like any of this. And I'm not going to want to have to participate.
That's fine,
And you're going to have lots of people,
but you don't have to.
at the public hearing who bring that up.
That's fine. But the person who wants to have to sell their land, who has land behind there that they're going to want to sell and develop, and your road happens to be, you're using whatever, it's going to have to be brought up to standard, and it's going to have to be a road maintenance agreement, which you do not have to sign.
Yeah. Francois, you've been trying to get a word in here.
All right, Francois. Sorry.
Couple of things. The banks are now requiring whether there's, if somebody's selling their house on your private road, they're now requiring a road maintenance agreement. We are going
That
through
is
this situation right now where I live.
And what
That's the
typically happens is the borrower signs a road maintenance agreement saying that they're responsible for all of the maintenance.
So if I may, that's my first point. My second point, if I may follow your example, Mike, and say, all right, Mike has decided that he's not going to sign, but then he's leaving. He's had enough of his neighbors. He's selling his property. So can we do something so that whoever he's selling to needs to sign?
Bake him a pie and try to get him to sign it voluntarily, but we cannot require it.
See,
Right.
that's what we went through. We took our statement out.
Right. Yeah.
Right,
All of this can only apply to something going forward.
right.
We can't
Or people
apply.
volunteering.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
And the other thing too
as
about the
unlikely as
banks,
that may be.
what we talked about at our meeting was even some of our federal loaners do not require. I went online and I saw there's a really nice chart there of all the various groups of people that loan money, government wise. Fannie Mae, some of them don't require it, some of them do. So it's kind of still all over the place apparently. This was just, like a couple weeks ago. The other thing about about this was, yes, if you're borrowing money, they might require it. But if you're not borrowing money, and if people can come in here and buy 600 acres or 130 acres or cash and see, they're going to buy houses. There are $400,000 houses listed near me right now. Those people are going to come in cash. That'll be
Yeah, I
an
think part of
easy
the-
cash sale.
part
So
of the
they're
thought-
not going to have any. They're not going to have any bank.
Yeah, part of the thought was if you're extending additional division rights, then that would motivate people. Said, yes, if I can get an extra lot, then I'm willing to sign up and maintain, like the bank asked. It's a very similar situation.
Right.
Yeah. It has to be all carrot, no stick. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course,
So
if it's a new subdivision, we're going to see the.
that's not going to be a problem.
Right.
Right. So basically, we're trying to make it as easy as you can, but somebody's got to assume it. And Mr. Gregg, you've said that, because I asked this question, who owns the road, the private road? And what do you say about that? If there's nothing, what have you told us about that?
Typically, if it's a private road, private subdivision, in most of those cases, the road is owned one half by the people on one side and the other half on the other. If it does not have, a middle bit, if the road is on the very edge of the properties, then the owners of the respective lots own them. But, this is a case, and the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission are well aware of a circumstance where the county got stuck owning a road bed.
But we don't
and
want
would
it.
prefer not to have it.
Mhm.
But typically with these subdivisions, the way they are done, the owners on each side own to the middle of the road. And their surveys typically represent that.
Right, on my road, see, they don't. I own half, but nobody owns the other half. Nobody. So, and there are lots of roads like that too, probably, at least they tell me. But what about like right of way and easements and all that? See that?
Well, rights of ways and roads are different things.
Right.
One is what's in the deed book, the other is what's on the ground.
So that has to be
the
figured
point
out.
In terms of the ownership of the land, remember if it's a developer, which you would prefer these things be, it would be whatever he has put in his declaration.
That we have to
Determine
read and
who's
look
what.
at, right?
And again, it would be, incumbent upon the surveyor to specify who owns which portion of the road.
Right. So I don't know that I have any other answers.
Well, that's kind of above our pay grade anyway. that decision.
So we've tried to cover what we thought we could do, and it would be good and better for the county and for we did put the statement in, by the way, the last statement we put in about ownership and all, like Francois, we had that we had to take out. A private road shall be maintained to allow for safe navigation by all emergency services. We just said it needs to be safe. We didn't put anybody there. We don't know who's.
Just a positive statement.
Just a positive statement.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I recommend to you that you've been to all the meetings that we have, and we beat this to death and beat it again, beat it some more. I
Yeah.
think it's time to let the upper echelon tell us what they want to do.
Yeah,
I agree.
At this point, maybe I'll get together with Ligon, if we can wake him up over there. There's the things that Peter gave us some input on, having fresh eyes on this helped a lot. And we've got, at the very end, when we were getting really tired, there's going to have to be some revision of that, because we've said the same thing twice.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with Peter's,
Yeah.
pretty much everyone here.
But now we did have the question, that he had, and let's talk about that for a second. That'd be easy to find though. Who is we mentioned highway engineer, where do we have that? Somewhere in here.
Yeah,
right?
I think the term would just be district engineer. Highway engineer was the old term for the VDOT, but we just call it's a district
So
VDOT.
some of those
district.
Why
things-
don't you call it the VDOT district?
Well,
VDOT district
That's
engineer.
fine. If we say
Yeah.
that, they probably
Yeah.
call themselves
And
that.
we didn't bother with that because
Because
that
that's
was-
in
that
the
was-
old.
That's already
that was
exists, yeah.
old
We didn't
text.
touch that.
There is another fundamental issue, Fay and Ligon, that I think you ought to consider. Some of the comments in my email today pertain to the new stuff, but some of them pertain to stuff that was previously in the ordinance. And Fay has said, we didn't touch the stuff that was previously in the ordinance, but of course you did. And
Well-
one of the fundamental reasons for this whole exercise was to change 4 to 8, right?
Mhm.
So I think we ought to look at the stuff that was previously in where I've noted points.
Mhm.
And if a change needs to be made, we
I
ought to
agree.
make it rather than just putting blinders on.
No,
Yeah,
I agree. That's fine. That was our main emphasis was
That
getting.
wasn't part of our assignment.
Right. Well, at this point, yeah, I agree.
No, it wasn't. It was getting these two things done, standards and road.
yeah, I was going to codify it like I did the
Yeah.
last one, go through the whole, but it sounds like maybe the board would take these two things up, maybe, maybe beginning of August, which is
Yeah.
fine. There's no huge rush. They could look at it at one of their meetings, review it.
Well-
And if they're comfortable with it, then we could move forward with the hearing.
Yeah, Ligon, maybe I can sit down with you one day and we'll go through this. These are little odds and ends. We can finish that
Yeah.
up and get the wording the way we want it and have it ready to let the board look at
Maybe
it.
the board to look at it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, maybe
Yeah.
beginning of August when they look at it.
I don't think we need to beat it up anymore
Yeah.
right now.
No.
There's other things that need to be.
Agree with that.
Okay,
I'm done with it.
our next,
What am I supposed to do?
we're not quite done yet.
All
Sorry.
right, what are we?
We'll
next?
move
What else
along
do we
fast.
need to do?
C should not take long. We're looking at
Oh.
the mini storage units. Ligon has discussed this with us before, making it a special use permit in B1. And in looking at, just my own opinion, and looking at what we've been using as storage units in, I believe it was M1.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't actually written for many storage units. That was written for like a warehouse. So, yeah, I think this is not only appropriate, but it's probably needed right now. You want to introduce that, Ligon, real quickly?
Well, if we've gone with many, whatever is an M1
Yeah.
for 50 years and approved several mini storage units under that provision, I think this is probably an improvement on that as written. So I would just, whenever we move forward with more amendments, if it's September or October, I think this is a pretty simple one that we can just simply add to B1 that could be part of a hearing at some point. If everyone, and again, it's another one that the board could look at with the other two major ones we're going to look at at their next meeting. So would that work with everyone?
Yeah, well, let's put it this way. Does anybody have a question or an objection to this item? I think we've got a pretty much consensus that we can go forward with this. Yeah. My only question would be, knowing what's likely to happen when we do these other two amendments, do you want to try to put three of them on that same meeting?
Well, this could be the first one.
This could be the first one and be a good example.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. That would be,
Right.
yeah, that would be a good idea. Okay. All right, so, see, that didn't take long.
Yep.
All right. At the last workshop, I asked for everybody to take just a look at the
Vision statement.
Madison County
Comprehensive
Comprehensive Plan division statement, just to kind of get us started on this. Does anybody?
Do we have a
I don't-
copy
I
of
don't
it up?
think-
No?
Well, no, we don't have that.
Well,
I can read it if you want me to. But
I don't remember it.
Okay, I'll read it right quick. It's only a paragraph, and to be honest, I don't think we will need to make changes, but I just wanted to get a input on that.
And we can adapt it later, can't we?
Yeah, we're just starting this division statement. Let's see, page 4 here. Yeah, there's other things that are going to be more likely to take time. As residents of Madison County, we value and wish to preserve the county's scenic beauty, rural environment, farms and forests, friendly atmosphere, balanced economy, and good schools. We also recognize the need for economic growth, improved internet service and public utilities, modest population growth, and expanded sources of public revenues. The goals and implementation strategies presented in this comprehensive plan are designed to enable the county to realize this vision.
Oh, good.
Okay, for me right
I think we still are pretty much thinking along the same lines.
Yeah.
Okay, that being the case.
Can I have one more thing for
Yes.
adjourn, if we would? August 3rd, we don't have a hearing,
Uh-huh.
and normally we would probably just not have a hearing and be ready for the next workshop in a month. Our Ford shop glamping person wants to come back before he cannot make the workshop in August. For those that can attend, would you entertain just doing a workshop he has a revised proposal with potentially more acreage? Would you, again, going to probably move forward later, maybe in the fall, would that be okay to just do a workshop for the Plan Commission that want to come and listen to, just hear his proposal?
On August 3rd.
August 3rd.
Instead of a joint session.
Yeah, we'll just have a work session and.
We would ordinarily have been here anyway.
The only thing I say to that, Ligon, what will that do to impact the Krieglersville thing? If we don't have a work section in the middle of August, will that?
Oh, we'll have a work session middle of August.
Still have a work session.
He
All
can't
right.
make the middle of August. Ahmed will be
yeah.
out of
Okay.
town.
No
So
problem.
he asked, I said, well, I think it probably would be, so if it'd be okay, just do a work session with him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see, it looks like, anybody shaking their head, no? Okay.
No, that's
All right, okay.
One thought on this, Ligon or Jonathan, either one. We have a bit of a head start this time that we didn't have in the last go on the comprehensive plan because county employees a couple of years ago, Jonathan, I think, listed made a list of things that they thought were priorities for the county. Remember that?
I wasn't here, but
Yeah, you were here.
No,
I'm
he
not
wasn't.
aware, but I will be happy to dig through
Jonathan?
archives.
Clay will know.
I really don't. I'm just
I know the additional source beyond planning and zoning office was Mr. Monty from the regional commission office, but I'll dig through, Mr. Work, our archives and see. I don't personally recall, but I
This
think we'll be
was-
back. I've been gone since 2019.
This was actually, you're right, Ligon, you weren't here.
Ligon wasn't here.
But Jack was here and he did a survey of county employees and people like us, i.e. planning commission members and other people connected with the county as to what the county needed, what priorities existed in the eyes of people connected with the county. It would be helpful if you could find that and distribute it, because I know it happened.
Yeah, let me
Mr. Work,
dig.
I believe that was the Springstead study.
Yeah, that was on their pay. They all wanted to raise.
It wasn't, I'm not thinking about something
That's
on
not our
pay.
I'll dig through my.
The Springstead study had things other than pay, but what most people focused on was salary.
Their
increases.
benefits, right.
Yeah.
You're right, it does exist and it is buried in that report, but
Yeah.
it's,
And although that's probably information that we can use, right now, that's not our main thrust.
No,
We've
not
got,
our interest at all.
Well, and speaking of main thrust, so we can get this over with, if everybody would please look at the first three goals and the goals and implementation strategies. And in this case, I think we are going to have to be recommending some
Yes.
revisions and changes.
Absolutely.
So if you would bring those, not this new workshop, but our regular workshop.
If we don't.
Yeah.
The last 5 years have been a total waste.
Yeah, and we need to be moving on this.
Okay, y'all.
The first three are going to take some work. Okay, unless there's any other comment, can we have a
Move to
motion
adjourn.
move to adjourn? Any second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you. That was fun.